world. This is the Fan Fanatic Podcast. I'm Parker Gerlecki, aka the Fan Fanatic, and with me as always is my broadcast partner,
Dad,
aka Ryan Gerlecki. I've got a passion for all things sports. So, on the Fan Fanatic Podcast, we'll talk to anyone and everyone from all over the world of sports who will sit still long enough to answer my questions.
that's right. Now, as a result of complications from severe brain damage at birth, unfortunately, Parker will never be able to physically play sports, but that cannot and has never stopped him from loving everything about sports and dreaming of a career in broadcasting. So each of our guests graciously gives of their time on this podcast to invest in Parker's dream and to help him be part of the sports world he loves so dearly.
Now, let's play ball! Welcome back, Fanatic Addicts. It's an absolute honor and a privilege and a pleasure to introduce my guest, Mr. Stan, the voice of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, Cotten. So, Mr. Cotten, let's lead off by telling everyone who you are, where you're from, and your connection to the world of sports.
Well, how much time do you have?
My time is your time, my friend. My time is your time.
I got it. Well, first of all, thanks for the invite. It's an honor, Parker, to meet you and be on. I'm honored that you would ask to chat just a few minutes with me, and I look forward to our conversation here in a bit. But I'm Stan Cotten, and I am originally from Knoxville, Tennessee. I grew up in East Tennessee, went to Farragut High School there in Knoxville, and attended the University of Tennessee. And I've been in broadcasting now for, kind of hate to admit it, over 40 years now, 44 years. I've been at this, calling college football and basketball on the radio. The last 28 years at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, as the voice of the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. And our home is here in North Carolina now, and just trying to grind out another week this week. The Deacs have Clemson this week on the road down in Death Valley, and that will be certainly a tall order for Wake Forest. But we'll see how things shake out. That's what I love about what I do, Parker, because whatever game it is, you just never know what's going to happen. The coaches prepare, the players prepare, and we prepare for whatever happens. And that's what keeps it fresh and new and exciting for me, because you just never know what you're going to see. So anyway, that's my story in a minute and 15 seconds. And here we go.
So Riley Skinner, wasn't he a Wake Forest guy, Riley Skinner?
He was. Riley Skinner was a tremendous quarterback for Wake Forest way back in the early 2000s. His redshirt freshman year was 2006, when he started that year as the third quarterback on the depth chart and ended up starting for Wake Forest, leading Wake Forest to an ACC championship and a berth in the Orange Bowl, and went on to set a lot of Wake Forest's passing records, and was just an unbelievable quarterback, but probably and he was a great quarterback, but he was probably a better teammate and young man than he was a football player. And I think that's what, when you look at Riley Skinner, he's got the whole package. He really does. And what he means to Wake Forest is, I don't have the words to really to describe what Riley Skinner meant to Wake at the time as a player, and still all these many years later continues to support Wake Forest and support its players. And he was probably one of the, I would say, biggest cheerleaders for Sam Hartman when Sam was coming along. Obviously now the Notre Dame starting quarterback this year in his final years as a college player, but he spent those years at Wake Forest prior to transferring to Notre Dame, and was breaking all of Riley Skinner's records. Right. But again, Riley's a team player, always has been, and he was pulling hard for Sam, and I'm sure still does, even though now he's at Notre Dame.
So I'm all about like sports radio network theme songs. And it just so happens that the Wake Forest Sports Network, if I'm not mistaken, is owned by Learfield IMG College. And may I say, that Learfield theme song is probably one of the best in the business. Do you get to hear it
Do you hear it in your sleep?
No, like do you get to hear it in the broadcast, or do you have or do you take your headphones off at during commercial breaks?
No,
Like bow bow now 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 bow now now bow now now bow now bow now now bow now now now.
So you got it. It's kind of like you hear in your head what I hear in mine. I've heard it over and over and over, year after year after year. So yeah, I've got that one down.
Stan, it may not be as often as you've heard it, but we hear it here in our house quite a bit too.
Good. That's a good thing.
It's one of Parker's favorite songs, if you will.
Good.
So I know. So like a few years ago, I was watching ESPNU, I believe, and they were showing a Wake Forest basketball game, and I believe it was the Chris Paul. No, Tim Duncan. No, wait. Was it CP3 or Tim Duncan that went to Wake? I think it was one of those guys. Oh, so I think it was the Tim Duncan era. So like they were about to do the intros, and then the Demon Deacon just in classic Demon Deacon fashion, just riding his Harley, just comes on in. Do you get goosebumps watching him ride? Is it a Harley Davidson or is it a different brand of motorcycle?
No, it's a Harley, and Tim Duncan and Chris Paul both were Wake Forest greats in their day, and Tim Duncan, you go all the way back to his senior year. That was 28 years ago. That was my very first year at Wake Forest. Tim Duncan's last year was my first year. That's a really good marker for me. And wow, was he obviously a generational player, a special talent. You could make the argument probably, guys, that Tim Duncan's probably one of the best 5-6 players to ever play basketball. Certainly one of the top forwards in the game. But Tim was a unique individual in a lot of ways, and was true to himself, and was as good a player as he was. And again, we've talked about one of the all-time greats. He was a great teammate too, just really good in the locker room. Was really, as best he could, tried to deflect a lot of the attention that he got to his teammates. And we had to coax him to do pregame interviews or postgame interviews. He said, I'll talk to somebody else. I get talked to all the time. So that's the kind of player or kind of person he was, on top of being obviously one of the great players ever to play the game. So
I know that there was a duo in the ACC, the Chubb brothers, and I believe Bradley went to NC State, Brandon went to Wake Forest. Is that right, or is it Brandon, or was it the other? Is it the other way around?
The Chubb guys are pretty good players, obviously, and you picked two good ones right there.
Did I get that right? Bradley and Brandon.
Yep.
Wait, are they related to Nick by any chance? Nick Chubb. Are Bradley and Brady are
that I'm not positive on that.
I don't think so.
I believe it was Brandon that went to Wake Forest. I think that's right. Right?
Yeah.
Brandon went to Wake Forest. All right. So, anyways, back to the Demon Deacon. Do you get chills seeing him come out on the Harley every time?
Yeah, it's one of the more unique entrances in college sports, and I've never seen that Harley wreck or blow a tire or anything like that. That's obviously, you hope you never see that, and we haven't. And it's always kind of cool to, I don't think, especially when it's indoors at the Joel Coliseum in basketball, I'm not sure that sometimes they're all that thrilled with it. It's awful loud. The fumes are coming out of the tailpipe and all that good stuff. But we're used to it. It goes away quickly, and it is pretty cool to see that. Whether it's the start of a football game or a basketball game, it's always exciting to see the Deacon come out there on the Harley. And a lot of times there's somebody with him, a special
That's right. Yeah.
a special person in football that opens the gate, the ceremonial opening of the gate, and it can be a former player, former coach, a local dignitary, whatever. There have been all kinds of people over the years who have ridden that Harley out there on the football field. But yeah, that's a pretty cool thing.
Hold on, Parker. I would guess that means whoever is the Demon Deacon has to have a pretty special skill set there. Like if you're going to be able to drive a motorcycle, but then be trusted to drive a motorcycle with somebody else on the back, you can just any old person in that suit.
Well, that's the thing, because you never know who's under that suit sometimes, right? I mean,
so in other words, it's like the Philly fanatic and his ATV.
Well, you just never know who's under that deacon head, right? I mean, there may be more than one, is all I know. We'll leave it at that.
But anyways, do you so speaking of chills, I know that the Clemson running down up the hill at Clemson is known to give chills, or that's what I've heard from.
It's never happened to me.
Have you ever do you get chills seeing the Tigers run down the hill in Death Valley?
I don't know about chills, but I like going to Clemson. It's one of the great entrances in college football. They do it well there, and growing up in Tennessee, when the Vols would come out and run through the T in Knoxville, that was pretty cool to see. And certainly Clemson's, they touch Howard's Rock up there and then run down the hill, and Coach Sweeney. Bless his heart. I hope he never falls. He gets it pretty good going down that hill.
He's going to pull a hammy sometime. There's no way.
Yeah, I even think one particular player in my, I can't remember who it was, but he gave the Rock a good old smooch.
Well, I'm not surprised over the years. I mean, there are a lot of guys that have to come off those buses at the top of the hill and touch that rock and run down. I'm sure it's a thrill for them. I know it is. And, they release the balloons, and the Clemson fans go crazy, and they should. I mean, it's a great entrance, no question about it.
Can I give a shout out to a mutual friend that you know that we both know?
Sure.
Miss Lisa Shaw. Do you know her? She's
a
good. Yeah, she's a good one, isn't she?
She's a great one. Haven't seen her in a long, long time. Her and her husband Kent and their family, but they're special to the Cottens. I got to know them a long, long time ago, and they are great people without question. We love them.
Oh, by the way, tell your daughter congrats on the marriage.
Thank you. We're 2 for 2. We're 2 for 2 and through. So appreciate that. That was about a month ago, and all went well. And so now we're all done with marrying girls off. We can relax, sit back and relax.
All right. So what is your favorite tradition at Wake Forest?
Oh, wow. Probably after big wins, when the students and a lot of folks go up on campus, and there's a place called the Quad, and it's surrounded by trees, and they throw toilet paper in the trees. It's called rolling the quad.
Wait, what?
And that happens after. I mean, it happened when the women won the national championship at golf. It happens after big football games. It happens after big basketball wins or field hockey, whatever. The students will gather up on the quad, and toilet paper becomes scarce for a couple of days because they roll the quad and roll all the trees after a big win. That's pretty cool.
Huh. Speaking of which, my producer mom is an Auburn fan, and it just so happens that they do the same thing.
War Eagle. I like the Tigers. That's when I was a young man getting recruited. I wanted to be a football player, and I went to Auburn on one of my recruiting visits, and special place, and actually got to meet the old legendary coach Shug Jordan. The football stadium is named after him, and got to meet him while on campus. That was a treat, but always been an Auburn fan.
So there's actually another thing that baffles the living what out of me. During broadcast, on the radio, they'll say, when they're getting to the sponsorship, where they rattle off all the sponsors, thank you, blah 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 blah, and then they say announcers are provided by Learfield and approved by saying by insert institution name here. Is that true that that Learfield picks the announcers and the school has to approve of them beforehand?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, it for instance, at Wake Forest, um, we pay the university a rights fee, and so we have the rights to the broadcast. It belongs to Wake Forest, but Wake Forest has the final say so on who the announcers are, and they have the say so on a lot of other things too. It's a partnership and a very good one, and a long standing one between Learfield and Wake. But yeah, that's very true, and we take that very seriously, and the folks at Wake Forest have to like what we're doing, right? And if they don't, then they can change what we're doing. They can change announcers. They can do a lot of other things too. So yeah, that's absolutely true.
Another thing, I know that the current the football stadium at Wake Forest used to be known as BB&T Field, then it was Truist Field, but now it's some other name that I can't remember off the top of my head. Which brings me to this: did another company buy the naming rights from Truist to the football stadium?
Well, what happened is, and this it's now a Legacy Federal Credit Union Stadium, and you're right, it was Truist Field for a while. Truist still has a terrific partnership with Wake Forest. They've just changed some things that they're doing. And I think as a company, they are pulling their names off of a lot of buildings and stadiums, not just Wake Forest. And that created a void there. And thankfully, a longtime partner of Wake Forest, which is Legacy, stepped in and stepped up its game a little bit to put its name on the stadium. But the cool thing about that is that Wake Forest still has a really good relationship with the Truist people, and obviously a very good relationship with the Legacy people. And that's when you think about what I do, all those sponsorships and people listening to commercials when they listen to games or watch games, the advertising revenue from that pays for a lot of things. And one of those is my salary. So you'll never hear me say a bad thing about ad revenue or that there's too many anything. Yeah, we can't have enough if you ask me. But again, two great partners of Wake Forest, both Truist and a Legacy.
Biscuits. Hold on. Wait. Oh yeah.
You can tell you're from the South, Parker.
Two references to biscuits.
So you mentioned that you've been the longtime voice of the Demon Deacons, but you also said that your whole career hasn't been with the Demon Deacons. Where were you before you were the voice of the Demon Deacons?
Right before I was at Wake Forest, I was at a place called Marshall University up in Huntington, West Virginia. I was there for 4 years, 4 of the best years of my life as the voice of the Thundering Herd. And
what about before that?
Before that, for 12 years, I was the voice at Carson-Newman College. It's a small Division II school outside of Knoxville, about 30 minutes or so. And my high school football coach at Farragut High School became the head coach at Carson-Newman. And once I couldn't play football anymore, I started getting involved with radio and television. And he said, "Look, why don't you come announce our ball games?" And so I started doing that and did it for 12 years, and then went from there to Marshall, and from Marshall to Wake Forest. So I've been at 3 places, 3 stops. This is my last one. I can promise you that.
Oh, by the way, go Eagles! Carson-Newman Eagles, right?
Yeah, when I was there, they won 5 national championships in football. They were something special. They really were. Ken Sparks, who passed away a few years ago, was the longtime coach there. And I can't remember exactly when Coach Sparks died. He was in the top 10 all time in college wins. But again, they won 5 national titles when I was there, and his time there was very special. He really had the Eagles going.
I believe they made a documentary about Marshall. We Are Marshall. Were you there in the We Are in the days of the the burning of the the burning and or rebuilding of the campus of Marshall University, or was that way after your time there?
Well, there was a plane crash back in 1970. I was only 10 years old then, and it was kind of interesting. My first year at Marshall was in the fall of 1992, and it didn't take long to understand how that horrible plane crash and the death of all those young men and other people on that plane really kind of galvanized that community. And that week leading up to the national championship game, my first year in 1992, and that was the first national title that Marshall won at the 1AA level, 1AA at the time. But you could just feel that emotion building through the playoffs and into that championship week. It was absolutely incredible. It really, really was. And when Marshall actually won that national title over Youngstown State, just all that emotion started pouring out. And so that's a program that lost its entire team in 1970. And then all those years and decades later, winning a national title was absolutely an incredibly emotional thing. And to be a small part of that, announcing that game and being the voice of the herd was just an incredible opportunity for me, an honor for me to be behind the microphone that afternoon when the herd beat Youngstown State. It was, I'll never forget it. Never, ever forget that. And I know all those folks who were in and around that program, 32 years ago, will never forget it. And that's, you're asking about the movie. That movie was about that story of rebuilding that team after the plane crash. And it's just incredible.
Very interesting, very interesting. And a little bit of Marshall lore for you. I believe in 2013, they took Virginia Tech to overtime in Blacksburg, but Virginia Tech won by a touchdown.
I'll trust you on that. I'll have to, whatever you say, Parker. I'm sure you did your homework. So I left there in 1995, so that was way after me. So whatever you say, I'll trust.
There's a question I forgot to ask Bob that came up in my.
Whoa! You got to set that up because that was a conversation before we got started, Parker. You got to set that up. Who you're talking about now? Back
Bob
it up
Kessling.
and get that connection.
Yeah,
but no one knows the connection yet.
So a good.
Why don't you ask?
How do you know Bob Kessling?
There we go.
Bob Kessling, the current play-by-play announcer at Tennessee, very good friend of mine. I owe Bob a lot. He gave me my first job at WIVK Radio in Knoxville. And again, I've known Bob for decades. Someone I look up to, again, for having enough faith in me to give me a job, and then, to be a sounding board all these years later still. Don't get to talk or see Bob a whole lot. We're always working at the same time. But anyway, Bob Kessling and I go all the way back to the late 1970s. And then we worked together in the early 80s at WIVK Radio. And, Bob's been a fixture in the Knoxville radio and television scene for forever, it seems like. And he's been a special person to me without question.
So anyhow, one question I forgot to ask: do radio announcers get connected with do radio announcers from like the different schools get connected with each other?
Absolutely. It's a fraternity, and I'm not sure that I've ever, in again over 40 years now, ask a fellow broadcaster for help and got turned down. And that's one reason why, Parker, when you asked me to come on, yes, I'll do it. We'll make time to do it. We all have to help one another. Certainly along the way, I've had so many people help me. And so it's just it's what we do for one another. And again, we all call one another and exchange ideas and listen to one another's tapes, critique one another. So that's done very frequently. Yes, between a lot of people. Absolutely.
Do you think do you still have connections with like radio announcers from other schools?
Absolutely. Yeah, a good friend of mine at Marshall. His name is Steve Cotten. We're not related, although we are very good friends. We worked together at Carson Newman. He spells his last name Cotton. I spelled my last name Cotten. We're good friends. My daughters call him Uncle Steve, but we talk not every day, but probably every week. There are folks I worked in television with that I still maintain relationships with, and other broadcasters around the ACC. When our teams play one another, we're in contact with one another, and we exchange information and all kinds of things. So those relationships are certainly real, and I think they're great for everybody.
So
Parker, hold on, wait, Parker. I gotta ask. So I grew up and still am a huge Florida State fan.
I was gonna get to that.
The great Gene Deckerhoff.
Yes. Hold on. Wait. So, Mr. Cotten, you mean to tell me that in a heartbeat you could get Andy Demetra, who is the voice of the Jackets, and Gene Deckerhoff, who is the ex-voice of the Florida State Seminoles, on the podcast? Because I would love to talk to Gene. I don't know if I mentioned this, but my producer is an Auburn fan, and I would love to talk. I'm not. If my producer would mind. No. So, Mom, would you mind if I did somehow manage to get Gene Deckerhoff on the podcast? Would you mind if I talked about the Auburn game?
You want to hear about 2013 and him calling that game?
Hey,
I like
Gene,
that idea.
I would love to be acquainted with all the different announcers. Like some of the heroes of mine are radio announcers. Do you mind if I name a few?
Go ahead. I mean, Gene Deckerhoff, you start right at the top. I mean, he and I've known Gene forever, and he's a lot of fun and obviously an incredibly talented broadcaster. And all those years with Florida State and Tampa Bay in the NFL, he's a piece of work, as my dad would say. He's a unique individual.
What about the new voice of the Noles, Jeff Colhane? Have y'all acquainted yet?
No, Jeff, not personally. When Jeff got the job, and you were asking about relationships earlier, and do we share information? When Jeff got the job, I contacted him, congratulated him on that job, welcomed him to the ACC, and since then we've stayed in touch and exchanged information when the Noles and the Deacs get together, and that's just kind of the way it works.
Very cool, very cool. So yeah, I'm an avid sports fan. As a matter of fact, I would listen to any radio broadcast like Eli Gold at Alabama, or Andy Demetra at Georgia Tech, or all those guys. Sorry, I know.
Parker, let me ask a follow-up while you compose yourself. You said it a couple times. Before games, you might exchange info with each other. What are you sharing with each other? Just like stuff they're picking up during the week, just being there in the town, or like what sorts of info are you getting from each other?
Yeah, that's a good question. The schools are really good now at providing all the information we might need. For instance, our last game was with Georgia Tech, and the folks in Atlanta do a great job, and they give you all the information you could possibly want. But Andy and I got together and before the game, actually, we exchanged some information, just stats and things like that early in the week. Maybe it's like, hey, I don't have Wake Forest depth chart yet. Can you give it to me? Absolutely. And so we kind of get things to one another early, like on a Sunday of game week. The schools will usually put those things out Monday, Tuesday, something like that. But Andy was kind of like me, wanting to get an early jump. And so we exchange information like that. But we also get together and just talk about our team. And I would say, hey, like Jalen Hudson hadn't played a whole lot yet. You need to probably put him on your depth chart. he's probably going to get 10 to 15 snaps today, things like that. Just information that probably they're not going to find on an information packet from the school. You don't want to divulge secrets or anything, and that was certainly no secret because Coach Clausen had talked about it on the radio and things like that. But you try to help them have a better call. The more information they can have, they'll do a better job. And then the information that Andy, a few little tidbits he gave me, helped me on my call of our game. So again, it's like I said a few minutes ago, you go back to helping one another, and it's just kind of a circular thing. And, if Georgia Tech has a great broadcast and we have a great broadcast, then that's all good.
There is another name I want to mention, then I'll move on. Brandon Cotten, the ex-voice of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, who now is the television voice of the Atlanta Braves, who took over that job, who took over as voice of the Atlanta Braves for the great Chip Carey, who now works for the St. Louis Cardinals. What about Brandon? Do you think you could get Brandon on the podcast? Because if I remember correctly, he called. Do you remember the time Georgia Tech beat Florida State off of that Lance Austin blocked field goal, run back for a touchdown?
If you say it happened, I believe you.
Because I believe that was Brandon that called that game for Tech for the Tech IMG Sports Network at the time. But anyways,
Brandon's a great young talent, no question about it, and he has risen rapidly through the ranks and does a great job with the Braves, as you know. But I have known Brandon a few years, and again, he's just, if you can get him on, good for you. Maybe the Shaws have more connections in Atlanta than I do. Maybe they can help here.
Yeah, it just so happens that Miss Lisa knows Mr. Vad Lee, one of the greatest Georgia Tech football players of all time.
Maybe a strong statement.
Are you kidding me? Vad Lee,
I remember.
Oh, okay.
Next question.
Yeah, sorry, I know. 30 minutes into the episode, and I've only asked one question so far. All right. Do you have a favorite sport to call at Wake Forest?
I get asked that a lot. I would say no. I love college football and wanted to be a college football player. But I'm telling you, once basketball starts, the thing that's unique about basketball and what, to me at least, separates it a little bit, or not separates it, but differentiates itself with regard to my involvement, is you're so much closer to the action in basketball. And you can hear the coaches, you can hear the players and the officials, you can see a lot of the emotion on faces and all those types of things because you're so close. At a football stadium, you're a long way away and it's not as intimate, so again, even though I like college football as much as anything else, or probably more than anything else, being so close and having that kind of intimate setting in basketball kind of levels the playing field a little bit. So they're equally fun, I guess, and it's coming up soon here where we'll be doing the last part of football and the first part of basketball season together. We call it the dreaded overlap here in the Cotten household when Dad's never around. He's working every night or on the road, but it's one of those times that we kind of dread, but at the same time we kind of love it because it's just overload of football and basketball and coaches shows and travel and once it's over, it's you kind of exhale and get ready for the finish of basketball. But I feel privileged to have the job that I have, and I love doing the football, and certainly when you kind of pass the baton into basketball, it's kind of equally cool. So and do a lot of baseball too. So it keeps us pretty busy.
Another question for you. On radio broadcasts, they do scoreboard updates. Like, does Dan, if I remember correctly, like from listening to Georgia Tech games on the radio, Dan Courts did the scoreboard updates for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets Sports Network. Does he do the scoreboard updates for all of Learfield IMG College, or does every school have their own guy that does the scoreboard update?
Yeah, every school's got their guy, or some may have a gal. I'm not sure. I don't think so, but yeah, everybody's got their own scoreboard host, and that you should see network control on a given Saturday. It is it's just chaos. Well, it's structured chaos. It's crazy. It looks like the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, but yeah, everybody's got their own person.
I've always wanted to see what a network control looks like.
It's crazy. I mean, it really is, because, different games starting at different times and all those different players, and they're just these cubicles all over the place and microphones everywhere. And I don't know how they do it, but somehow, some way they do.
So out of all your experiences, what was the greatest moment or memory?
Whew, that's over 44 years, it's hard to pick one. And I'll be honest with you, Parker, when you get as old as I am now, I'm in my early 60s now, when you start to look back and think about things, it's the people you start to remember, and you cherish the relationships you have with people. Now, there are obviously games that I'll always recall. The Orange Bowl was something special. The ACC championship that year in 2006 was special. I remember the first NCAA tournament basketball game that first year here with Tim Duncan. We all thought Wake had a great shot of maybe making the Final Four. Didn't work out that way that year, but Wake's been to 7 consecutive bowl games, and I remember all the bowl games. Those are special games. When you obviously get to a bowl game, you've done something good. Wake played for an ACC title a couple of years ago against Pittsburgh in football. But so it's hard. It's hard to just pin down a game. I remember, for instance, the late Skip Prosper's first trip to Chapel Hill with Chris Paul as a freshman. I think the score was 119-116. Wake Forest won at the Dean Dome in triple overtime. That's a game that you don't forget too quickly. So it's hard to pin down one or two in 28 years, but there certainly have been special ones. And again, it's been my privilege to sit in that seat and have the greatest spot on the court to watch and call.
I'm going to ask my broadcast partner a question. Father, didn't Mr. Tim Duncan have a nickname?
I don't know.
What about you, Mr. Cotten? Do you remember of a nickname that Mr. Duncan had?
Everybody called him Timmy. I'm not sure of a nickname.
You're not confusing him with another San Antonio Spurs center by the name of David Robinson, who was the Admiral.
No, because no. Oh, crud. Now I'm going to...
We'll have to look at it later, buddy. You got to move on.
Can we look at it? Wait, can we...
You move on and I'll look it up.
Wait, look it up right now, okay? Because
Yep.
I'm gonna be beating myself over the head if I can't remember it once you say it. Okay. Wait. Oh, dear.
I don't remember one if there was one.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I don't either.
I think your dad.
Parker, just move on. I'll look it up.
Wait. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Do you have a favorite?
I'm sorry, I've already got something. Nicknamed the Big Fundamental, Parker. I'd never heard that before.
No.
That's what it says. The Big Fundamental.
Doesn't ring a bell. Mr. Cotten, sir?
Uh-huh.
Do you have a favorite call that you've done at Wake Forest?
Wow.
Or like at your, like not just Wake Forest, like in your broadcast career period, like favorite call?
I don't know. Probably not. It's funny you asked that. This past weekend, they had a reunion at Carson Newman of all those national championship teams of the 1980s. Again, there were 5 of them. And they asked me they had a banquet. And of course we had a ball game, and I couldn't make it back to Jefferson City. And they they asked me to just make a video to greet the crowd and say hello and offer a couple of comments about what I remembered. And I remember that very first national championship game I ever called in 1983. Now I was 23 years old, and Carson Newman beat Mesa, Colorado. And I never, in big games like that, I never think about, oh, what am I going to say at the end? I never pre-plan that. I just kind of go with whatever kind of comes to my head at the time. And I remember those last few minutes at Carson Newman in that national championship game, which was so special to all of us. I mean, Carson Newman had never won a national title. I was young. I'd never broadcast a game that big. And it just, to me, it was, we were approaching Christmas. It was mid-December, and I loved Christmas as a kid, still love it today. And it felt kind of like Christmas morning. It was just that special. And when the clock ticked off, I said, it's Christmas in Colorado. Carson Newman's the national champion, and kind of relived that during that time working on that video. But that's certainly a special moment because it was the first big moment for me on the air way back when. But I don't know. Those games and those calls of those games just kind of stand on their own. And, people, fans, whatnot, have their favorites or not. I've never tried to stand out above the game. I think, and when I talk to younger broadcasters, I talk to them about just, here's the thing I would leave you with. Just always remember that the most important thing is the game. It's not the announcer, anything. It's the game. It's the competition between two teams that's the most important thing. And great games will produce great moments, and they'll produce opportunities for announcers to make great calls. Sometimes we nail them, sometimes we don't, I guess. But I've had, it's been an honor and a privilege for me to have a lot of opportunities over the years at Wake Forest with regard to, conference championships and bowl games and NCAA tournament games and ACC tournament games, things like that. So, who knows what the future will bring? Who knows what this weekend will bring down at Clemson? You never know. Wake Forest isn't supposed to win that game, but they might. That's why they play it, right? You might. You just never know.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but do you, out of all the calls you made, is there a specific one that you remember word for word?
Parker, I don't think so. Not really.
Okay, how about?
And sometimes those calls are very similar, because I use a lot of the same words. We all have our own styles and things we say. But nothing that comes to mind. No.
Give me a quarterback running back duo at Wake Forest.
A quarterback running back duo.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, I kind of like the one we have now, Mitch Griffiths, and he's a young quarterback, and he's a guy that is coming in after several years playing behind Sam Hartman, so he's had to wait his turn. He's made a few mistakes, and a lot of fans have gotten on him, and I get it. That's what being a fan is like. But I like Mitch Griffiths, and he grew up in a football family. His dad was his high school coach, and he's like the first person when I go to practice, he'll come up and say hello, and he's just a great teammate, a good guy to have in the locker room. And Wake's got a running back by the name of Damon Claiborne, and he's got a little wiggle to him and a good step. He's one of those players that you really have to keep an eyeball on because he can go 30, 40 yards in a heartbeat. So, there have been different players over the years. You mentioned earlier Riley Skinner. Certainly, he was a great quarterback. Chris Barclay was the ACC Player of the Year when he was a running back for Wake Forest several seasons back. He was one of the great running backs of all time at Wake, and probably doesn't get the credit that he deserves, but he certainly does in my book. He's now a coach at Louisville, and or at Purdue, I think now. But
the reason why I'm asking you this, so what would it? So give me your call of what it would sound like if Mitch Griffiths, or what if never mind. Just give me a concept touchdown Wake Forest call. Like, just name two random players, and like what I'm saying is, give me how you would call a Wake Forest touchdown on the radio.
That's hard to do. I mean, I'm describing what I'm looking at, and I'm looking off into the dark here out in Davie County. That's hard to do. But if Mitch Griffiths was going to throw a touchdown pass, it'd probably be to Jamal Banks.
So can you do that call for me?
What's that?
So let's do a hypothetical call. Mitch Griffiths to
How about you do that for me?
Mitch Griffiths back to pass. DeWan Banks touchdown, Demon Deacons.
Well, I'm not going to top that. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Okay. So do you have any advice for me since I want to get into broadcasting, Mr. Stan Cotten, sir?
Well, you're already way ahead of the game. How old are you?
15, my friend. 15.
15. Well, see, I thought I started young. I was calling Carson Newman games, and I was 19 years old. And that was early. That was right after my freshman year in college at Tennessee. But so you've checked off a good box. You've started early. You've got great support with two parents who love you a lot and are supporting you. So that's fantastic. I had the same. My parents today still listen to Wake Forest games. They are 94 and 87. Wow. And they listen on the Wake Forest Game Day app to every game we do. And so you've checked off two of the big boxes. You started young, and you've got parents who support you and love you. So that you're 2 for 2 there. But I would say just every opportunity that you have, take it if you can.
Thank you.
Take it if you can. And don't let anybody pigeonhole you into what they want you to be. You need to be what you want to be. You want to be a podcast guy. You want to call games on the radio. You want to call games on television. You want to be a TV news sports anchor. And I would suggest as you grow up and get different opportunities to try all of those things if you can. I mean, at one point back in my 20s, I was the TV sports anchor in Knoxville at Channel 8 for a while. And although it was great experience, I knew right away that that's not what I wanted to do long term. I knew that I wanted to be a part of football games and a part of basketball games. And one thing when I talk to young folks, I'll ask them, you guys, how many of you know what you want to do in 10 years? And they all seem to think that they know, and that's a good thing. But usually most people later in life are doing something different than they thought they would when they were 14 or 15. But you to me sound like one of those guys who really you're zoned in on working in sports, and that's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And again, because you've gotten such a young start and your parents are in your court, I'm not sure there's any stopping you.
So I'm gonna have So I'm gonna give a shout out. I believe a neighbor of my maternal grandparents is a Wake Forest graduate, and I'm hoping that someday they'll take me. That this person who I cannot remember the name, Mother, do you know who I'm talking about? What the Bakers, are they family friends or neighbors? So a family friend of ours, the Bakers, happen to be graduates of said Wake Forest University, which actually brings me to a question. How in the world did they get the name Wake Forest?
Well, there's a town down in the Raleigh area named Wake Forest, and I think that's in, if I'm not mistaken, Wake County.
Mm-hmm.
But that may or may not be. But Wake Forest is an actual town, and the university used to be there long time ago, and it moved in the 1950s. It moved to Winston-Salem, but and I'm guessing it got its name because of that.
Anywho, you know how like college football broadcasts normally have 3 parts? The tailgate show, you know, like the little broadcast outside the stadium, the pregame show, the broadcast for like the little like the hour before the actual kickoff, and then the actual game broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
Does Wake Forest have a tailgate show broadcast outside the stadium, or do the football broadcast immediately start inside the stadium?
We've done it both ways. We've done. As a matter of fact, we were laughing about it the other day. We were outside years ago, and one of our sponsors was a car dealership, and we actually did part of our pregame show in the bed of a truck outside the stadium. So
that's a true tailgate show.
It was a true tailgate show. But we've done it outside right now. We currently do an hour pregame show, and it's all inside in the broadcast booth. But my guess would be that before long, we'll be back outside. We're outside, and we have about a 30-minute post-game show, and obviously it's done from the booth. But so we're all indoors right now.
Is that why they call it a tailgate show, because it's outside?
Well, a lot of folks are outside in the parking lots and having parties before the game, and I guess the tailgate comes from that. Sure.
The reason why I'm asking is, if and or when we get tickets to a Wake Forest game from the Bakers, I was wondering if there would be some convoluted way for us to connect. So I was thinking tailgate show, because no way I could get unless of course like you put in a word to whoever it is in charge of the broadcast booth, like that. Like, what I'm saying is, find a way that like somehow I make the trek out to Winston-Salem and we connect and like we meet face to face.
Well, I'll say this. I've got a key to our booth, so.
So you're saying I could wait?
I'm the gatekeeper. So
you are the gatekeeper.
Wait, can I go to the next step? Maybe sit in the broadcast booth, headphones on and everything, and actually see what it's like to watch a football game from the actual broadcast booth. Because I've been in the PA booth, but never the radio broadcast booth of a football game.
I'll tell you this: if you can make your way to a game one day, one year, whenever that is, we actually have 2 or 3 sets of headphones that guests can come in and listen, and they can hear us communicate, because like when I'm calling a game, there are 2 or 3 people talking to me at the same time. And so there are a lot of voices.
In network control, right? In network control.
So we can make that happen.
Sweet. Okay. So sorry, this has kind of gotten long. We'll wrap it up now. Okay. So on this podcast, we are all sports fanatics. So the last question we ask, as a fan, what do you think is the all-time greatest moment in sports?
Wow. Well, one that I think is really, really cool is when the United States won the gold medal in hockey at the Olympics way back when. And I'm not even I don't even know the rules of hockey. I was in college and remembered watching that. It was, the United States beat the Russians in the semifinal game and then went on to win the gold medal. But the game over the Russians, which I guess wasn't the gold medal game, but it was the semifinal game, was one of the great moments in sport. Al Michaels was a young broadcaster then, was on the call of that. That's got to be one of the great moment in sports. When you think about sports, you have to, think about golf and tennis and hockey and soccer and football and basketball and baseball. Boxing and swimming and It just depends on the folks you're talking to and what kind of circle you're in with regard to great moments in sports. Secretariat, a horse race, winning the Triple Crown back in the 70s. And I think it was the Preakness won by like 28 lengths, something like that. And people have made the argument that Secretariat, a horse, is the greatest athlete of all time. We could go crazy trying to pick the best moment in sports or the best athlete, because everybody's got opinions, and that's one of the great things about having a podcast. You can talk to different people, and they can offer what they think. You can agree, disagree, whatever, and that's what makes the world go round, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and by the way, one more thing. Are you familiar with Lenoir-Rhyne University? Lenoir, how do you pronounce that? Lenoir, Lenoir-Rhyne, Lenoir.
Lenoir-Rhyne is about 50 minutes, a little less than an hour from my house up in Hickory. I was at Carson
did
Newman,
you say Hickory, North Carolina, as in home of the Hickory? Hickory Crawdads, right?
Yep.
The Hickory Crawdads.
That's where Lenoir-Rhyne is, and Lenoir-Rhyne and Carson Newman, when I was at Carson Newman, in the same conference, South Atlantic Conference. So I've called a lot of games at Lenoir-Rhyne.
And the reason why I bring up Lenoir-Rhyne, an ex-family member, and when I say ex, I mean, am I allowed to say this on the air? What?
I don't know.
Wait. So my cousin actually used to date someone. Sadly, they're not together anymore. Who played soccer over at Lenoir-Rhyne.
Did we cut them out of the family or what?
He voluntarily stepped out.
Let's just say my cousin has. She's moved on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully she'll find love someday. I've started to tell her there's plenty of fish in the sea. All right, sorry, I know I'm an idiot. And wait, by the way, father question. I know we're still on the air, but are my little tangent? Wait, Mr. Cotten, sir. Mr. Cotten, sir. Question.
Yes.
You know, during the interview I went on my some little tangents.
Uh-huh.
As a broadcaster, is it ever okay to do that, or is there some point where you have to move on from something, thing?
If you have, if you're filling 3 hours in a talk show, you better have opinions and you better have tangents to go on, or it's hard to fill the time. I don't think I would be a good talk show host, because I don't think that deeply about a lot of the sports, right? I move when a game's over, I'm ready to move on to the next one. But sure, I mean, if you're doing a podcast or a talk show, tangents I think are great.
Like the one earlier in the show, like when I was rattling off announcer guests. Was that is that an appropriate tangent, or do I need to?
Or this one that we're on right now?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm just gonna.
Parker, now you're on a tangent about tangents now.
That's unbelievable.
Sorry. I'm just gonna end the episode now. All right, fanatics. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Fan and Fanatic. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all of your support. Don't forget to follow or subscribe, or whatever your podcast app says to do. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For my broadcast partner, Ryan Grelecki, this is Parker Grelecki saying, game, set, match.